sibling, and if you looked from the outside, you think I was the kind of person who had lived in luxury. I grew up in a towering penthouse overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. It was a sophisticated residence on the 47th floor, with a private terrace and an art collection worth more than $80 million. But what made that place priceless had nothing to do with numbers. My dad, Harrison Sterling, was a legendary investment banking CEO who built financial empires for Fortune 500 companies and spent 20 years creating those empires. Every decision, every strategy was tied to his vision and relentless ambition. None of us ever called it a penthouse. To my dad, it was a fortress built on principles. He used to say, a real legacy isn't built with money but with the intelligence of those who create it. My mom Evelyn was a former securities analyst at Goldman Sachs. She didn't wear flashy diamonds or carry status symbol purses, but listened to her market analysis, and you'll understand why my dad respected her so deeply. She could turn complex financial theories about risk management, portfolio diversification, and market psychology into captivating lessons and unwaveringly apply those strategies to our family decisions. I still remember when I was 8 and asked my mom for the latest iPad because all my classmates had one. She just smiled and asked, "Would you like to learn how to earn it yourself with your own investment strategy?" So I started studying company reports, tracking stock movements, even helping analyze my parents' quarterly portfolios. It took nearly 4 months to generate enough returns from my small practice account. When I finally bought the device with my earnings, my mom said, "You didn't just purchase something, you learned the real power of financial independence." Even though my family controlled enormous assets, my parents chose to send me to a prestigious private school where my friends had no idea about the kind of deals my parents closed every day. I rode in the family car, ate lunch from the school cafeteria, and never flaunted expensive accessories. One time when I was invited to a classmate's house, my mom reminded me, "Veronica, don't mention our investments unless someone asks. Let your intellect be what people remember, not your family's portfolio." I learned to live strategically in a world where people assumed I had everything, but the truth was I was taught that the most valuable asset isn't a trust fund or stock options. It's how I analyze situations, how I face market volatility, and the precision behind every calculated move. My dad once took me to the top floor of our building, his private office lined with mahogany panels and windows overlooking the entire financial district. He stood there, arms crossed, looked at me and said, "Veronica, one day this empire will be yours, but remember that doesn't mean you belong to money. Let your worth come from what you build, not what you inherit." I was too young to fully grasp his words back then, but looking back, every lesson feels burned into the neural pathways of my mind. That penthouse wasn't just a place to live. It was a constant reminder that nothing is more powerful than strategic thinking and calculated risk, especially in a world where greed constantly threatens to destroy everything. I grew up with that mindset, carrying with me a sharp edge many never see. But I never forgot what my dad taught: wealth without wisdom only leads to ruin. And I believed that until the person I trusted most betrayed everything I held sacred. Living strategically in a wealthy family was the best way to avoid judgment, but sometimes discretion invites people to fabricate stories about you. When I was 16, something happened that completely changed how I saw friendship and financial manipulation. I was a junior at Whitmore Academy, an elite prep school full of ambition and competition. I had a close group of 3 friends, Brianna, Savannah, and Kendall. Savannah was the most calculating, always scheming, always probing, and the first to ask Veronica, "Is it true your family owns half of Manhattan? A private jet too?" I gave a measured smile and deflected. I didn't want my friends to see me as a target. I enjoyed our study sessions in the library, our strategic discussions about college applications, and I genuinely believed what we had was authentic. Then Brianna's investment portfolio crashed. It was a mock trading account her father had set up for her birthday, and she had proudly shown it during economics class. She asked me to review her strategy. I still remember the sinking feeling in my stomach when I realized her positions were fundamentally flawed and would lose everything. The account went red. Brianna stared at the screen, not crying, but her hands shook. I immediately offered to help analyze what went wrong and find a recovery strategy. That evening I told my mom. She studied me for a long moment, then firmly said, Veronica, you can offer advice and share knowledge, but you can't use family connections to fix mistakes that weren't made maliciously. She'll have to take responsibility through her learning. It took me 2 weeks of research and strategy sessions before I presented Brianna with a detailed recovery plan. But when I showed her the analysis, she didn't thank me. Savannah, sitting beside her, sneered at for someone with insider information like her. Market manipulation is nothing. Are you even sure this isn't just another scheme, Brianna? I went cold. That calculating feeling returned. The next day, rumors started spreading that I'd sabotaged her portfolio on purpose to demonstrate my superiority, that I used family intel to manipulate the mock market. Kendall didn't say anything, but the way she distanced herself spoke volumes. The dean heard about it when several students filed a formal complaint, something I later discovered Savannah orchestrated. My dad cleared his schedule to meet with school administration. During the meeting with the dean, he calmly listened to all the accusations and then methodically presented time-stamped analysis documents, trading records, and expert validation from 3 independent sources. He simply said, "I taught my daughter that excellence doesn't need to apologize, it just needs to prove itself." I was vindicated. Savannah and Brianna were sanctioned for academic harassment. But what I'll never forget wasn't their punishment, it was what my dad said as we left the dean's office. "Veronica, some people will only see your advantages, never your intellect. Don't let those people diminish your capabilities." After that, I severed ties with that social circle. I no longer shared details about my analytical methods. I learned how to diplomatically refuse when someone asked me to share market insights or hinted at wanting investment advice. I wasn't hostile, just more strategic. One time Savannah confronted me outside a coffee shop and mocked, "Still pretending to be self-made? I thought you only succeeded through daddy's connections." I simply smiled because by then I understood one truth clearly: you don't need to justify yourself to people who've already decided to resent your success. Years later, I still keep that first investment analysis report, marked with red corrections and hard-earned insights. But to me, it's a reminder of the power of intellectual independence, of the first scars envy can inflict, and of how I learned that sometimes true wealth is the ability to succeed alone without compromising your principles. I met Marcus when I was 33 at a charity auction in the Hamptons where I was attending as a philanthropic board member. He was one of the bidders in the front section and the only one confident enough to approach me after the event. "Is there a balance between strategic giving and genuine social impact?" That question didn't surprise me, it impressed me. He wasn't asking to network, he was asking to understand. After the auction, we talked briefly in the champagne reception and I realized Marcus was the articulate, charming type with sophisticated perspectives. He worked in luxury real estate, was highly successful and driven, and, more importantly, seemed genuinely interested in my philanthropic philosophy beyond my financial capacity. Something that felt refreshing. We stayed connected. The first conversations were about social impact, which gradually evolved into intimate dinners, weekend retreats, then carefully planned vacations to discuss shared values. Marcus had a kind of magnetism that made life feel more purposeful. He wasn't intimidated by my success, never probed about my assets, and appeared uninterested in my family's influence. Once I teasingly asked, "Aren't you going to research my background?" Marcus just smiled, "I'd rather discover who you are through our connection." After 18 months of courtship, we had an elegant wedding with select family and influential friends at the Metropolitan Club. My mom sat beside me during preparations and whispered, "Your dad would be proud if he saw your choice today." I believed that completely. If he were still alive, I think he would have respected Marcus, at least initially. After the wedding, Marcus moved into my penthouse overlooking Central Park. 6 weeks later, I decided it was time to show Marcus the Sterling family office building in Midtown, where I conducted my most sensitive business. I hadn't brought anyone there since my dad's sudden death 3 years earlier, partly because I wasn't emotionally ready, partly because I feared someone would view it as an opportunity. That visit occurred on a crisp autumn morning. When the private elevator opened to the executive floor, Marcus went silent. He stepped into the space slowly, like he was entering a temple of power. The marble reception, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the conference room still arranged exactly as my dad had designed it. I watched his expression as he absorbed the mahogany-paneled office lined with family portraits and the financial awards my dad had earned through decades of brilliance. "Veronica, you control all of this?" His voice carried amazement. I nodded. I built upon what he started. He gave a low whistle, like he was recalculating everything, but I noticed something shift in his eyes, an intensity one hadn't recognized before. After that day, he started making different inquiries. At first, they seemed innocent. How long did it take to build this empire? Who manages your offshore accounts? Have you ever considered expanding internationally? But gradually he introduced more specific concepts: merger opportunities, succession planning, power of attorney arrangements, and decision-making authorities. I couldn't ignore that something inside me began to feel suspicious. I didn't want to doubt Marcus, the man I chose to marry, but I also couldn't forget my dad's warnings. The one who truly loves you will respect your autonomy even when they don't understand your decisions. A few weeks later, during dinner at our penthouse, as I was reviewing quarterly reports, Marcus casually asked, "Veronica, if something unexpected happened to you, who would assume control of Sterling Investments?" I paused, my pen hovering over the documents. Meeting his gaze directly, I said, "That's a corporate governance matter, Marcus, and I trust you understand the boundaries." He smiled, but it wasn't the genuine warmth I had grown to love. For the first time since we met, I felt a thin wire, almost invisible but dangerously sharp, tension building between two people who once promised complete transparency. And I began to suspect, was there an agenda inside him I'd missed simply because I wanted to trust again? The call from Mom came on a Tuesday morning just as I was about to enter a board meeting with institutional investors. The message was brief but chilling: "Veronica, your dad collapsed." I left the Sterling building within 5 minutes. On the way to Mount Sinai Hospital, my mind was racing with possibilities. My dad had always been invincible. Every morning he reviewed global markets for 2 hours, maintained perfect health, and never missed his executive physicals. But when I rushed into the ICU and saw him connected to machines, I knew everything had changed. He was unconscious when I arrived, but the monitors showed stable vital signs. I sat beside him, gripped his hand and listened as my mom whispered the cardiologist said, "Massive heart attack. He's stable now, but the damage is extensive." I don't remember exactly how I processed it. All I know is the world seemed to fracture into 1,000 sharp pieces. I had always believed my dad was immortal, that he would guide every major decision in my life. But now I had to face the possibility of losing him. From that day on, I delegated all non-essential responsibilities and restructured my schedule to maintain vigil at the hospital. I read financial reports to him, shared updates about our portfolio performance, and sometimes played the classical music he cherished. In those moments, I almost forgot about the corporate pressures waiting outside. Marcus, initially, appeared supportive. He occasionally brought gourmet meals, inquired about prognosis updates, and drove me home during late hours. But just a few weeks in, his patience began to deteriorate. One evening when I returned drained after a 12-hour hospital vigil, Marcus was waiting in the foyer, arms crossed, his usual charm absent. "Veronica, how long are you planning to maintain this routine?" I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I understand you're devoted to your parents, but our relationship also requires attention. You're absent constantly. I feel like I'm married to a ghost." I stood speechless. I was too exhausted to engage, but inside something shattered. Was this really the man who once vowed to support me through any crisis? 3 weeks later, my dad died on a peaceful Sunday morning. My mom and I held vigil by his bedside, his hand clasping mine until his final breath. I didn't weep. I just sat there listening to the monitors fall silent and felt my foundation crumble beneath me. The memorial service was held at the Sterling family office, elegant and private, exactly as he had specified. Throughout the ceremony, Marcus was present, courteous but detached. He avoided eye contact and barely acknowledged the devastation I was experiencing. After the service, my mom presented me with a sealed envelope. Inside was a meticulously prepared succession plan. Dad had transferred complete control of Sterling Investments to me, the empire he once called his greatest achievement. The company was valued at nearly $850 million, but to me it was irreplaceable. Marcus learned about the inheritance from my mom during the reception and his demeanor transformed immediately. That night, over dinner, he abruptly asked, "So what's your strategy for managing sterling investments?" I studied him, suspicion rising within me. "I haven't formulated plans yet. Everything's still raw." He nodded and added, "I was thinking that if I had some advisory role, it might provide valuable perspective, legally speaking." I didn't respond, but my instincts sharpened. For the first time, I sensed Marcus was viewing my dad's legacy not as a family trust, but as an opportunity to exploit. A few days later, I received confirmation from our family attorney, Mr. Whitmore, my dad's trusted advisor. He verified that all succession documents were executed and I was the sole controlling shareholder of the company. That gray afternoon, standing in Dad's executive office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline he once commanded, I silently vowed to protect his empire regardless of the cost. But I never anticipated that the first threat I'd face would come from the man sharing my bed each night. 8 weeks after my dad's death, the atmosphere in our penthouse had become suffocating. Marcus could no longer conceal his impatience. He started interrogating me relentlessly about Sterling Investments' operational structure, and despite my consistent deflections, he persisted with the same inquiries. One evening, as I was reviewing my dad's private investment files in his study, Marcus appeared with an unusually grave expression. He handed me a folder, placed it on the desk and said smoothly, "I just consulted with an investment strategist named Vincent Cross. He specializes in corporate restructuring. I think we should establish joint decision-making authority to streamline future operations." I stared at him. "Marcus, what are you suggesting? Why would the ownership structure need modification?" He shrugged, feigning innocence. "We're married, Veronica. Partnership means shared responsibility, right? It's just strategic planning." I straightened, my pulse accelerating. "No. That company is a direct inheritance from my dad, and you understand that completely." He remained silent for several seconds, then smiled, but the warmth had vanished from his expression. "Well then, I suppose you won't be shocked to learn I've already initiated the process." I went rigid. "You did what?" Marcus retrieved his phone, opened an email and showed me the screen. It was a scanned corporate restructuring proposal stamped, under review. My name, Veronica Sterling, had been amended to include Marcus Blackwood as co-managing partner. I was horrified. "What the hell have you done?" Vincent confirmed I could process the documentation as a spouse if I could demonstrate vested interest, and I've already invested $1.2 million in consultation fees. I leaped to my feet, my voice shaking. "You attempted to alter corporate ownership without my authorization? Are you completely insane?" "I did what was necessary. If you won't collaborate, I have to protect my interests. We can function as business associates if that's preferable. Otherwise, I think dissolution is the logical solution." Every word struck like ice. The man I once believed would be my life partner now stood before me like a predator, calculating and ruthless. I stepped backward, fighting to maintain composure. "Marcus, what you've attempted isn't just fraudulent, it's betrayal. You exploited my vulnerability and the trust one invested in you." He crossed his arms, sneering. "Trust? You concealed your family's entire financial empire from me. I married someone who never disclosed anything genuinely significant." I stood paralyzed, my heart hammering, but instead of responding, I left the room. I needed to determine if his claims were legitimate. And when I contacted our family attorney, the authentic Mr. Whitmore, not this alleged Vincent, I discovered the situation was more serious than I imagined. Mr. Whitmore sighed after hearing my account. "Veronica, there's no registered investment consultant named Vincent Cross in New York. You've encountered fraud, and if Marcus paid that individual, he's been victimized by professional deception." It felt like the oxygen had been drained from the room. Marcus hadn't just attempted to steal my inheritance, he had also been foolish enough to lose a fortune in the process. But the deepest pain didn't stem from the financial damage, it came from recognizing I had loved and trusted someone completely worthless. That night I returned home to find Marcus sitting in the living room, his face ashen. "Vincent's disappeared. I think I've been defrauded." I didn't scream, I didn't rage. I simply placed the authentic corporate documents that Mr. Whitmore had just delivered on the coffee table, along with confirmation that I remained the sole owner of Sterling Investments. You've violated boundaries, Marcus, and I have no justification to remain with you. He started to speak, but I raised my hand to silence him. There's no explanation that can repair the trust you annihilated. I walked away quietly, but internally a chapter had ended permanently. And I understood from that moment forward, Marcus was no longer part of my future. 2 days after that final confrontation, I officially moved out of the penthouse Marcus and I had once shared. I took nothing but essential documents and a leather portfolio containing my dad's handwritten investment strategies. Everything else, the memories, the dreams and the promises, I abandoned like someone releasing a weighted anchor into dark water. I moved back to the Sterling family office building, converting the executive suite into my temporary residence. I thought that after I exposed the truth and severed ties, Marcus would quietly vanish from my life. But I had underestimated the desperation and delusion still consuming him. That morning, while I was reviewing quarterly reports with my assistant, the building security alerted me to an unauthorized visitor. On the surveillance monitor, I saw Marcus standing in the lobby, gesturing wildly at the reception desk. I picked up the intercom and connected to building security. Marcus, what are you doing here? He looked directly into the camera, his voice aggressive and demanding. Veronica, I have legal standing to access this building. You're withholding assets unlawfully. We need to negotiate. I responded coldly, I'm the sole owner. If you don't leave immediately, I'll contact the authorities. As if he had prepared for my response, Marcus produced a folder from his briefcase. I had a new consultant review everything. You think you're untouchable, but I'm not powerless anymore. I didn't waste another word. I immediately called building security. Within 3 minutes, 2 uniformed officers arrived and instructed Marcus to vacate the premises. He protested loudly, claiming he was the victim, that he'd been deceived, and that I was heartless. But I didn't descend to the lobby. I simply observed from my office window as he shouted accusations while professional security personnel maintained their composure and escorted him away. That afternoon, I met with my attorney to finalize something crucial, a comprehensive restraining order. I refused to live with the anxiety that Marcus might appear unexpectedly, alternating between manipulation and intimidation. Just as we completed the paperwork, my phone chimed. A message from an unknown contact appeared. Marcus lost $1.2 million to Vincent Cross. Cross is a known fraudster, not licensed anywhere. The message came from a former colleague in the financial sector who had once collaborated with Marcus on a development project. It turned out that the consultant Vincent Cross, whom Marcus had blindly trusted, was actually a sophisticated swindler. He had been investigated repeatedly for impersonating financial professionals and exploiting the desperate. Marcus had transferred him an enormous sum, $1.2 million, to expedite the ownership restructuring, only to receive expertly forged documents that nearly convinced even experienced attorneys. I should have felt satisfied, but honestly, I felt nothing. Marcus had hurled himself into destruction, and only he could save himself now. That evening, I sat alone in my dad's private study, soft lighting illuminating the mahogany desk. I opened the center drawer and retrieved the final letter Dad had written before his death, his distinctive, confident handwriting providing comfort simply by existing. My dearest Veronica, if someone ever betrays your trust, remember that trust is the foundation of everything meaningful we build. It requires years to establish but can be destroyed by a single deception. Don't grieve what you've lost because releasing what's worthless is often the only path to preserving what matters. I folded the letter carefully and exhaled slowly. I knew I had entered a new phase of existence, without Marcus, without the illusions others had attempted to manipulate. And if my dad had bequeathed me anything more precious than Sterling Investments, it was the resilience I possessed in that moment. Outside, the city hummed with evening energy. Life was progressing, and for the first time in months, I felt genuine control over the company and my destiny. Our divorce proceedings concluded more rapidly than anticipated, perhaps because Marcus no longer possessed the resources to contest. He had no legal representation, no assets, and most critically, no credibility remaining with me. We executed the documents at a discreet law firm in Midtown Manhattan. No one recognized my identity or history in this location, drastically different from our elegant, joy-filled wedding at the Metropolitan Club just 18 months prior. Marcus said virtually nothing during the signing. He simply stared downward, exhaustion evident in his features, his signature shaking slightly. When the final notarization was complete, I stood first. I hope you eventually find authentic purpose. That was all I could express without compromising my emotional boundaries again. I returned to Sterling Investments and expanded its operations by converting my dad's former conference room into a strategic planning center. After supporting me through the transition, my mom began pursuing personal interests, attending art exhibitions, consulting on philanthropic initiatives, and maintaining daily fitness routines. The building, once heavy with loss, was gradually revitalizing. Then came the anniversary of my dad's death. We organized a modest memorial, inviting close associates, longtime business partners and family friends who had known our organization for decades. Everything was meticulously arranged, from the memorial display in the boardroom to elegant floral arrangements throughout the executive floor. As the ceremony commenced, I noticed an unexpected figure outside the building entrance. It was Marcus. He appeared more haggard than our last encounter, his clothing disheveled, his posture defeated and his expression hollow. He pressed his palm against the glass when he saw me observing, as if wordlessly appealing. I activated the intercom but maintained professional distance. "Why are you here, Marcus?" He spoke with difficulty. "I wanted to express regret to you and his memory. I know I don't deserve consideration, but I need you to understand I've lost everything." I studied him, keeping my voice controlled. "You had opportunities to preserve something valuable, but you chose to sacrifice everything for greed. I was manipulated, I was foolish, I understand that now." The memorial music began inside. I breathed deeply, then responded decisively, "Today honors my dad. This isn't your opportunity for absolution. If you retain any respect for me or his legacy, please leave." Marcus acknowledged but remained stationary. He retreated several steps, his expression conveying final, desperate hope. "I'm not requesting forgiveness, just don't despise me." I remained silent, not from hatred, but because I had no emotions remaining to invest. I gestured to building security. They understood immediately, emerging discreetly without creating disturbance. One officer spoke quietly to Marcus and guided him away from the entrance. I didn't observe his departure. I returned inside where everyone waited, where my dad's portrait presided over the gathering surrounded by white orchids and soft candlelight. The ceremony continued. No one referenced Marcus's appearance, as if he had never approached our building. But within me, something concluded permanently, not the relationship, but the final remnants of regret. That evening, I sat alone in the executive lounge my dad had designed for private reflection. Outside, Manhattan's lights sparkled against the darkness. I prepared a cup of premium coffee and watched the city pulse below. I reflected on Marcus, how he had infiltrated, manipulated, and then departed my life like a financial crisis, devastating, chaotic, destabilizing everything I had considered secure. But ultimately, markets recover, and portfolios rebuild stronger. The building thrives, my mom radiates confidence every morning, and I finally rest peacefully. When autumn arrived and the Manhattan skyline sharpened with crisp air, I knew it was time to write a new chapter in my life. The grief over my dad had transformed into purposeful memory, and the wounds from Marcus were finally healing. One early morning, as my mom and I reviewed quarterly reports in the executive conference room, she suddenly said, "Veronica, do you think we could transform Sterling Investments into something more meaningful for others?" I looked at her, initially puzzled, then understood her vision. She wasn't suggesting we sell or dilute the company. She meant expanding its purpose. I once heard my dad say, "A successful business isn't just for generating profit, it's for creating positive impact." And now, as my life entered a new phase, perhaps Sterling Investments needed broader purpose too, something beyond pure financial returns. We started by renovating the building's unused floors. I converted them into educational spaces with modern technology, collaborative workstations, and sophisticated presentation equipment. The executive floor was redesigned to host financial literacy seminars with interactive learning stations and comfortable seating arrangements. My mom, who excelled at curriculum development, assumed leadership of our educational initiative. She named the program Sterling Academy, honoring my dad's legacy. We recruited experienced financial educators to ensure our content met professional standards for teaching investment fundamentals. A former boardroom became a mentorship center. News spread rapidly through professional networks. The first workshop focused on retirement planning for young professionals. Then a nonprofit organization booked Sterling Academy for comprehensive financial training for their staff. The gratitude in participants' eyes as they mastered investment concepts, the confidence they gained through practical exercises, and the transformation from financial anxiety to empowerment all confirmed that I had chosen correctly. And for the first time in months, I felt genuinely fulfilled. No more isolated decision-making, no more corporate politics, just eager students and the satisfaction of meaningful education. I also resumed personal writing, documenting investment strategies, analyzing my dad's methodologies, and processing lessons from my failed marriage, not for publication, but for clarity. Remarkably, the building, once shadowed by loss, had become a center of growth. Each morning, Mom and I toured the facilities, reviewing curriculum materials. We planned upcoming seminars, selected guest speakers for specialized topics, or simply discussed market trends while observing student progress. Our professional relationship deepened significantly. We were no longer just family members sharing space, we were genuine collaborators, partners. One day, while analyzing enrollment statistics, my mom thoughtfully asked, "What do you think your dad would say about what we're accomplishing now?" I smiled, watching sunlight illuminate the financial district through our windows. I believe he'd be proud because we're fulfilling his vision of using success to elevate others. We maintained careful growth parameters. We accepted maximum 50 students per month to ensure personalized attention and quality instruction. Every instructor was rigorously vetted, selected not only for expertise but for genuine commitment to student success. Sterling Investments was no longer merely a wealth management firm, but a catalyst for financial empowerment. I had previously thought loss meant ending, but it actually represented transformation, one that helped me discover a more purposeful, authentic version of myself. Sterling Academy continued hosting workshops, mentorship programs, and specialized training for individuals seeking financial independence. And me? I remained actively involved, growing more confident and satisfied with each program we delivered. At the end of that autumn, as the last golden leaves in Central Park began to fall, I received an unexpected email. The sender, Marcus. The subject line read simply acknowledgement. It took me almost 15 minutes to open it, not because I felt anger, but because I wasn't certain I wanted to know anything more about him. But curiosity prevailed, and I read. "Veronica, thank you for ending everything when you did." It forced me to confront myself and face realities I never had the courage to acknowledge. I found work at a financial counseling center in Albany. I help people who've been bankrupted or defrauded find direction again. Maybe because I hit bottom, too, I have the patience to listen genuinely. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I hope you know the qualities you once saw in me weren't entirely fictional. Wishing you all the success you've always deserved, Marcus. I closed the laptop and sat quietly by the executive window where I could see the entire financial district transitioning to evening. I didn't weep, and I didn't celebrate. I just felt a release inside me, as if the final burden had been lifted after a long, strategic campaign. Knowing Marcus was pursuing a more genuine path didn't make me want to revisit the past, but it helped me believe that sometimes destruction can be the catalyst for reconstruction. The final months of the year passed in productive momentum at Sterling Academy. We launched our first comprehensive investment course with advanced curriculum, portfolio theory, risk analysis, and hands-on trading simulations. The lead participant, a young entrepreneur from Boston, told me after graduation, "You didn't just teach us finance, you gave us financial freedom." In the evenings, I often sat with my mom in the executive lounge, reviewing enrollment data, watching the city pulse with economic activity that my dad had once helped shape. I could still sense his presence in the strategic decisions I made, in the ethical standards I maintained, and in every choice guided by principled leadership. Sterling Investments was no longer just a financial institution. It was evidence of the power of intelligent capital, of perseverance through adversity, and of the conviction that every setback can become a setup for greater success. I once lost everything in a calculated betrayal, love, trust, even my confidence in my own judgment. But I recovered it all through my own strategic actions, protecting what was valuable and discarding what wasn't. One crisp December morning, I stood in the executive suite, looking down at young professionals hurrying to their offices with purpose and ambition. I placed my hand on the mahogany desk and understood, this was the conclusion of one strategic phase, but also the commencement of countless new opportunities. Sterling Academy wasn't just an institution preserving my dad's vision. It was a testament to a woman's determination, a woman who once faced betrayal but emerged stronger, independent and no longer requiring external validation. And I knew, regardless of what challenges the future might present, I would always remember this truth: no one can diminish your worth unless you surrender your power voluntarily. From my experience, I've learned that loss isn't always defeat, it can be the foundation for growth. Success doesn't come from having someone beside you, it comes from understanding your own value and never allowing anyone else to determine it for you.